The silence in Ethan and Olivia's small bungalow had become a physical presence, as heavy and oppressive as the humid summer air that settled over their suburban Ohio neighborhood. It clung to the worn fabric of the sofa, seeped into the cracks in the kitchen linoleum, and soured the taste of their morning coffee. It was a silence born not of peace, but of 1,000 unspoken anxieties, a testament to the mountain of medical bills stacked neatly, terrifyingly, on the corner of their dining table. Ethan felt the weight of it in the perpetual ache of his left shoulder. It was a dull, grinding pain, a constant reminder of the day a scaffolding collapsed, sending him tumbling 2 stories and shattering his collarbone. The accident had ended his career as a high-demand commercial electrician and had left him with a limited range of motion and a reservoir of bitterness that seemed to have no bottom. He was 38, a man who had built his life on the strength of his hands, now struggling to even lift a grocery bag without a wince. The man who was supposed to be the provider now felt like the primary liability. Olivia, at 36, carried the weight differently. It was in the faint purple smudges beneath her eyes, a roadmap of her exhaustion. She had picked up the slack without a word of complaint, at least not at first. Her job as a part-time librarian, once a source of quiet joy, was now just one of 2 paychecks. The other came from long, grueling evening shifts waiting tables at a family restaurant downtown, where she'd force a smile for strangers while her feet throbbed and her mind tallied up their debts. She moved through their home with a determined energy, a stark contrast to Ethan's brooding stillness. She was still fighting, and it was this fight, this stubborn refusal to surrender to despair, that had become the new fault line in their marriage. Tonight the fault line was about to rupture. Olivia sat at the table, a pen hovering over a calculator, the offending pile of bills illuminated by the dim overhead light. Ethan stood by the sink, staring out the window at the darkening street, his good hand clenching and unclenching. The physical therapy copay went up again, Olivia said, her voice carefully neutral. It was the opening salvo in a battle they'd fought too many times before. Of course it did, Ethan muttered, his reflection a ghostly, scowling stranger in the glass. Why wouldn't it? We can cover it, she continued, tapping the pen. If I take that extra shift on Saturday and we stick to rice and beans for the next week, we'll be okay. A surge of hot, useless anger washed over Ethan. He turned from the window. We're not okay, Liv. We're drowning. You're working yourself to the bone. And for what? So I can go to a guy who tells me to lift a 2-pound weight and call it progress? It's a joke. It's not a joke, Ethan. It's recovery, she said, her voice rising with a familiar edge of frustration. You have to believe you can get better. Belief doesn't pay the bills, he shot back, his voice louder than he intended. The silence shattered, replaced by the ringing of his own anger. Facts pay the bills. The fact is I'm damaged goods. The fact is your 2 jobs are barely keeping our heads above water. Olivia's shoulders slumped. She looked down at the numbers, a meaningless jumble of red ink and decimal points that represented their life. So what do you want me to do? Give up? Is that it? We just let them take the house? I want reality, he said, gesturing around the small room. I want us to stop pretending some miracle is going to fall out of the sky and save us. Her eyes flashed, and she pushed the papers away with a sudden, sharp movement. You know, I saw a story today. A woman in Michigan, a single mom, won the Powerball. $100 million. It changed her life. Ethan let out a harsh, barking laugh. The Powerball? You're kidding me, right? That's your plan? The lottery? Olivia, that's a tax on people who are bad at math. It's a scam to sell false hope to desperate people. It's not false hope to everyone, she insisted, her voice trembling slightly. For that woman, it was real. Sometimes you just need a little bit of luck, a little bit of faith. Faith! He spat the word out as if it were poison. Faith is what you have when you have nothing else. It's an illusion. I'm done with illusions. His voice lowered, becoming cold and sharp. We have $5 left in the grocery budget until Friday. Are you going to spend it on milk or on a piece of paper full of impossible dreams? The cruelty of his words hung in the air between them. He saw the hurt in her eyes, the way her hopeful spirit seemed to dim and flicker out. He knew he'd gone too far, but the bitter pride that had become his armor wouldn't let him take it back. Without another word, Olivia stood up, her face a mask of weary resignation, and walked out of the room. The silence that returned was worse than before, thick with the jagged edges of their argument. Ethan stood there for a long time, the anger slowly draining away, leaving only a hollow ache in his chest that was far more painful than the one in his shoulder. He grabbed his keys from the hook by the door, needing to escape the suffocating quiet of the house. He didn't know where he was going. He just drove. 10 minutes later, he found himself pulling into the glaringly bright lot of a 24-hour convenience store. As he got out of the car, a large, flashing sign in the window caught his eye. Powerball jackpot, 220 million. A dark, defiant impulse seized him. It was a raw, childish, and utterly compelling urge. He thought of Olivia's hopeful face and his own cynical retort. "I'll show her," he thought, a grim satisfaction twisting inside him. "I'll waste the money, I'll buy the ticket, and on Wednesday night, when it's worth absolutely nothing, I'll hold it up and prove my point. I'll prove that her kind of hope is a fool's game." He marched into the store, the little bell above the door chiming mockingly. He walked straight to the counter, past the racks of chips and candy. "One Powerball ticket," he said to the tired-looking clerk. "Quick pick." He didn't want to choose numbers. He didn't want to imbue the act with any meaning at all. This was an anti-ritual, a gesture of pure nihilism. He paid with a crumpled $5 bill from his wallet, the grocery money, and took the small slip of paper. He didn't even look at the numbers. He just folded it twice and shoved it deep into his wallet, a tiny, ticking time bomb of resentment. The next 2 days were a frozen tableau of their broken connection. They moved around each other like ghosts, exchanging only necessary words. Ethan worked in the garage, trying to fix a neighbor's lawnmower, his shoulder screaming in protest. Olivia left for her shifts and returned late, her exhaustion a wall between them. The lottery ticket remained in his wallet, forgotten. The argument had been made. The proof was just waiting to be revealed. Wednesday night arrived. Olivia had fallen into a deep, exhausted sleep on the sofa shortly after getting home from the restaurant, her work shoes still on. The television droned on, broadcasting the late-night news. Ethan sat in his armchair, nursing a glass of water, the house silent except for Olivia's soft breathing. A news anchor came on screen, smiling brightly. "And now, for the moment, millions have been waiting for. The winning Powerball numbers are in. And the big news tonight, a single winning ticket was sold right here in Cuyahoga County for the $220 million jackpot." Ethan scoffed into his glass. "Some lucky idiot," he thought. "Probably a syndicate of office workers who'll all end up suing each other." The winning numbers flashed across the bottom of the screen. 08, 14, 25, 33, 47, and the Powerball 18. He didn't know why he did it. Maybe it was a morbid sense of closure, the final nail in the coffin of his argument with Olivia. He pulled his worn leather wallet from his back pocket. He had to dig behind old receipts and his expired electrician's license to find the folded ticket. It felt flimsy and insignificant in his hand. He smoothed it out on the arm of his chair. His eyes scanned the line of numbers his cynical impulse had purchased. 08, 14, 25, 33, 47. His breath caught in his throat. It felt like a punch to the gut. No, it can't be. He looked back at the TV screen, then back at the ticket. The numbers stared back at him. Perfect. Impossible. His heart began to hammer against his ribs, a frantic, wild drumbeat. He looked at the last number on his ticket. The Powerball. The world seemed to tilt and go silent. The news anchor's voice faded into a meaningless buzz. The only reality was the slip of paper in his trembling hand. Every cynical, bitter, and pragmatic belief he had built his entire identity around crumbled into dust. The air left his lungs in a ragged gasp. He looked over at Olivia, sleeping peacefully on the sofa, her face softened in the dim light of the television. She looked so tired, so burdened. She was the dreamer, the hopeful one, and he had fought her every step of the way. The ticket he had bought to prove her wrong, to shatter her faith in luck and possibility, was about to change everything. It was about to prove that her hope wasn't foolish. It was the most powerful thing in the world. A single choked sound escaped his lips. Olivia. Olivia's name came out as a strangled whisper, barely audible over the drone of the television. Ethan said it again, louder this time, his voice cracking with an emotion so foreign and overwhelming he couldn't name it. Olivia, wake up. She stirred on the sofa, her brow furrowed in her sleep. She had been dreaming of falling, a familiar nightmare where the ground kept rushing up to meet her, but she never hit. Waking up felt like a continuation of the dream. She blinked, her eyes struggling to focus on Ethan, who was now kneeling in front of her. The look on his face terrified her. He was pale, his eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. For a heart-stopping second, she thought something terrible had happened. Another accident, a call from the hospital, a final, crushing bill they couldn't possibly pay. "Ethan, what is it? What's wrong?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep and sudden fear as she sat up. He didn't speak. He simply held out his hand, the small, flimsy lottery ticket resting on his palm as if it were a sacred artifact. She stared at it, confused. "What is that?" "The grocery money," he said, his voice hoarse. I bought a ticket that night. I wanted to prove you were wrong." The memory of their fight, sharp and painful, returned to her. The bitterness in his tone, the way he dismissed her hope as a childish fantasy. A fresh wave of hurt washed over her. "You what? Ethan, we needed that." "Just look," he interrupted, pushing the ticket closer. "Look at the numbers, and look at the TV." She followed his gaze to the television screen, where the winning Powerball numbers were still being displayed in a triumphant scrolling banner. Her eyes scanned the screen, then darted down to the ticket in his hand. She read the first line of numbers. Her mind refused to process it, to make the connection. She read them again, her finger tracing the ink on the paper. 08, 14, 25, 33, 47, and the final red number, 18. She looked back at the screen. The numbers matched. They all matched. It was an impossibility, a statistical absurdity, a glitch in the fabric of reality. But there it was. Her breath hitched. The room, which had felt suffocating just moments before, suddenly seemed vast and empty, all the air sucked out of it. "Is this real?" she whispered, her voice barely a thread of sound. She looked into his eyes, searching for the punchline, the cruel joke. But all she saw was a raw, naked vulnerability she hadn't seen in years. He nodded slowly, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. "It's real, Liv. I think we won." The words hung between them, impossibly large. $220 million. The number was so abstract it felt like fiction. It wasn't a sum of money. It was a rewriting of their entire existence. The mountain of bills on the dining table suddenly seemed like a molehill. The chronic ache in Ethan's shoulder, the exhaustion deep in Olivia's bones, the constant grinding fear that had become the soundtrack to their lives. It was all cast in a new, unbelievable light. Olivia took the ticket from his hand. Her fingers, calloused from lifting plates and shelving books, trembled as they closed around it. She didn't laugh or scream. Instead, a great, shuddering sob tore through her, a release of so much pent-up pain, worry, and desperate hope that it left her weak. She slumped forward, and Ethan caught her, wrapping his arms around her. They clung to each other amidst the worn cushions of their old sofa, two people adrift who had just found a life raft in the middle of a storm. They weren't just crying for the money. They were crying for the lost time, for the harsh words, for the distance that had grown between them. In that moment, holding his wife, Ethan felt the hard shell of his cynicism, built over a year of pain and helplessness, finally crack and fall away. The ticket he had bought out of spite, as a monument to his own bitterness, had become an instrument of grace. He had set out to prove a point about the futility of hope, and had instead been handed the most profound lesson of his life. He had been so focused on what was broken that he had forgotten how to see what was whole. The woman in his arms, who had never stopped believing, not just in luck, but in him. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair, the words raw and torn from a place deep inside him. "Liv, I am so sorry. For everything. For not listening. For being so angry all the time." She pulled back, her face wet with tears, and placed a hand on his cheek. "We were drowning, Ethan. We both were." The days that followed were a surreal blur of attorneys, financial advisors, and hushed phone calls. They opted for the lump sum payment, a staggering amount, even after taxes that made them both feel dizzy to contemplate. They told no one at first, guarding their secret like a fragile flame. It was their miracle, their second chance, and they wanted to understand what it meant for them before the world rushed in. The first thing they did wasn't to buy a new car or look at mansions. Ethan scheduled an appointment with the best orthopedic specialist in the state. Olivia walked into the restaurant where she worked, pulled her manager aside, and quietly gave her 2 weeks' notice. She did the same at the library, though with a heavier heart, promising to volunteer whenever she could. Taking off her apron after that final shift felt like shedding a heavy coat she hadn't realized she was wearing. With the immediate financial pressure gone, the oppressive silence in their house was replaced by something new: conversation. They talked for hours, late into the night, not about bills or budgets, but about dreams. They spoke of the trip to Italy they had always wanted to take, the small house with a garden Olivia had always dreamed of, the woodworking shop Ethan had once hoped to build in his garage. They were rediscovering each other, peeling back the layers of stress and resentment that had hidden the couple they used to be. The money didn't magically heal Ethan's shoulder, but it gave him access to the best care imaginable. He underwent a successful cutting-edge surgery that the specialist was confident would restore most of his mobility. The long road of physical therapy that followed was no longer a source of financial dread, but a journey of determined recovery. For the first time since the accident, Ethan felt a flicker of his old self returning, the capable, confident man who could build and fix things. He started with their marriage. He learned to listen, to validate Olivia's feelings instead of dismissing them. He found joy not in being the sole provider, but in being a true partner. He went with her to farmers' markets, took cooking classes, and helped her plan the layout of the garden she would soon have. Olivia, in turn, watched the deep lines of worry on her husband's face soften. She saw the return of the easy smile she had fallen in love with. Freed from the constant exhaustion of her double shifts, her own vibrant spirit re-emerged. She started writing again, reviving a passion for poetry she had long since abandoned. They decided to stay in Ohio, close to the community they knew. They bought a beautiful but modest home on a few acres of land just outside the city, large enough for a garden and a state-of-the-art workshop for Ethan, but not so large as to feel ostentatious. One of their first major decisions was how to use their fortune to impact others. Remembering the crushing weight of their own medical debt, they worked with their financial team to establish a charitable foundation. Its mission was simple: to anonymously pay off the medical bills of families in their county who were facing catastrophic health crises. They called it the Hope Fund, a quiet tribute to the argument that had changed their lives. They would never meet the people they helped, but reading the redacted letters of gratitude forwarded by the Foundation's administrator brought them a profound sense of purpose that no luxury purchase ever could. About a year after their win, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Olivia found Ethan in his newly completed workshop. The air smelled richly of sawdust and wood stain. He was standing over a workbench, carefully sanding a piece of maple wood. He moved without the slightest wince, his shoulder strong and sure. He looked up as she entered, and his face broke into a warm, genuine smile. "What are you making?" she asked, running a hand over the smooth surface of a completed rocking chair in the corner. "A cradle," he said, his eyes shining. "I figure it's time we started working on a new project together." Olivia's heart swelled. She walked over to him, and he wiped his hands on his jeans before wrapping his arms around her waist. They stood there for a long moment, bathed in the golden afternoon light streaming through the workshop window. The life they were living felt more real and infinitely more precious than any fantasy they could have conjured. The lottery ticket had been the key, but it hadn't been the prize. The prize was this, the quiet peace, the shared future, the rediscovered love. The ticket hadn't given them a new life. It had given them back their own, healed and whole again. And they both knew, with a certainty that went deeper than any bank account, that this was the greatest jackpot of all. The true measure of luck isn't found on a lottery ticket, but in the rediscovery of what truly matters. The win became a catalyst for Ethan and Olivia to realize that the greatest wealth they always possessed was each other's love and support. The money didn't magically fix their problems, but it provided the space and security for them to heal together, rebuilding the trust and partnership that financial hardship had worn away. The lesson is that sometimes an act of stubbornness can paradoxically open the door to humility, forgiveness, and a second chance at happiness. If you were inspired by this story, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more tales of hope and transformation.